Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Prestigious Pints in our Agile podcast series. This episode, we're talking with Dr. Sally-Ann Freudenberg, an Agile coach who she says is now retired, but I don't think she'll ever retire officially. I've known Sal for about 10 years or so. Paul has known her as well, and we met through a great shared connection of ours, Jean Baker, who was one of the things that we talked about today. You probably know Sal from a number of different areas, but probably the most prominent area is her pushing and promotion of the inclusivity of collaboration, so including neurodiversity, women inclusion and Agile. And ultimately her PhD in collaboration has driven a lot of what she's done. But she's, as with most of our guests, a lot more than just that. So we learn about a lot about her background, including her diving training, her work at in industries, companies like Cucumber and things, and all the way back to her dissertation on the psychology of pair programming. So a really interesting conversation with one of our favorite people. Hope you enjoy it, Dr. Sally-Ann Freudenberg. I feel like I haven't done this for a while.
Yeah, I feel a bit rusty. Well, it has been a while.
Sure it'll all come. Has it?
It's been a while since we've done. Last time we were together, we were actually in a pub.
Well, that's true.
Which is a novelty.
Back in our sheds. And we've got another special guest with us. Sal, where are you? Dr. Sal, where are you?
So I'm in Somerset. I'm in my office in rural Somerset, where it's a bit drizzly at the moment and very dark outside.
Yeah, we've got a lovely bay window there.
Yeah,
a nice view when it's bright.
Yeah, out onto the chickens.
The chickens.
Eggs every morning.
Well, they've stopped laying at the moment, and they probably won't start until the spring again. They're not liking the drizzly weather either.
So yes, Dr. Sally-Ann Freudenberg. I've never really given you the proper address. I always called you Sal.
That's what most people call me, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I actually want to talk about, because I know you've got your specialty. But we do need to go through the whole rigmarole for our. It's not a rigmarole. That sounds like a chore. But our listeners do like to know what we're drinking. So, have you got anything there, Paul?
I've got something a little bit special today, just for Sal, just for a special, and it's special because it's a memory for me, right? So I was in my local supermarket, and I'm going to hold it up to the camera. This is a bottle of Inch's cider.
Oh, lovely.
So Inch's, I used to work for Inch's. Oh, I've told you this, Jeff, haven't I? You know this. I used to work at a cider factory in my year out at uni. And it was Inch's cider. So I kind of feel tied to this brand anyway, because I used to work at the factory. It did get bought out since after I left. But it used to be a little tiny cider company in Devon, in a little village called Winkley. Don't laugh, Winkley.
How childish.
Yeah, and I worked there for about 6 months. I was a laboratory assistant. I was quality assurance in the lab, checking to make sure there was enough cider in every bottle. That was pretty much it, and checking the CO2.
The quantity rather than the quality you were checking.
No, it's quality as well. So I also had to check that there was enough CO2 in it. I did CO2 testing on the bottles.
Okay.
So I looked at this. Did you have to test the acidity and things like that as well?
Yeah, acidity. Yeah, a couple of other things, and every hour I'd run out and get a fresh set of bottles from the plant and just run tests on them. Yeah, and I did it for 6 months, and it's still. I think it's had a bit of a. It's made by Bulmers now, which is a big cider producer in Hereford. But yeah, so I thought I'd buy that for old time's sake, a bottle of Inch's. I pour it out then.
Sal, have you got a drink?
Yeah. Oh, my drink's really boring. Look, I've got some Ribena.
Oh, I love Ribena.
That's a great drink, though. Ribena is.
Have you ever had Ribena and lemonade?
No, I've made fizzy Ribena with the Soda Stream, but I've not put lemonade with it.
Too
Try
sweet,
it.
surely, Jeff. Too sweet.
No, well, you say that, but it's amazing. And some brand has brought out Ribena, fizzy Ribena, and I bought it in the supermarket, and it's not as good. Ribena and lemonade. So no, Ribena is a very, very good drink, and you could just put it in a wine glass and say it as red wine if you wanted to.
We can edit that back out if you like, Sal. You
can just... I could look really sophisticated, like I'm here with a glass of Merlot. No.
Well, it's normally the way around, isn't it? With these Zoom calls, is that people are putting their wine in a coffee mug, and pretending they're drinking coffee. But you're doing it the other way around. You always have to be different, don't you, Sal? Anyway, I've got a new toy. Physics. It's a home. Well, I didn't need to drop the brand in, I suppose. But it's a home sort of draft pour thing.
Oh.
So you can put any bottle in there or any can in there, and it will put in just a little bit of like CO2 or whatever, and it will make it taste like it's a draft rather than come out of a can or a bottle. So this was my birthday present, by the way. It was very late because it was out of stock because it was so popular. But I've got a Brewdog Double Haze. This is a 7.2 cloudy New England IPA. So it's got a little pipe in there.
All right, and you pop it up on top of the can.
Pop the pipe in the can.
Oh.
Turn it around to lock it in place, and then you just pour it out.
Wouldn't it be hilarious now if it went all over himself?
I think that might be my new favourite thing.
Oh, and does it taste different? That's what all our listeners want to know, Jeff. Does it taste different? Does it taste better?
Well, I think it does, but that might be psychology. And again, this is something we can talk to Sal about because Sal is an expert.
Have you done side by side, like blind taste test?
That's going to be something I'm going to try. Yeah, I will do. In fact, I've still got some left in the can, so why not?
Bit of confirmation bias in there, maybe, Jeff.
Yeah, but you'll know. You need to get somebody else to put the two cups, so you don't know which one's which.
Yeah, but it's a step, isn't it? I could try it.
Yeah.
And if I don't taste any difference here, there's no point doing the blind test. It's quite sweet. Is it sweet? Tastes sweet.
That's a lot more froth on the one you've prepared.
Yeah, I would happily drink it out of the can, but that is softer, and obviously you get the head, so you get the sort of frothy start, which is a little bit different. So it's a little bit softer. Yeah, it's nice. It's a cool gimmick, isn't it?
And it works with any bottle, any can.
Any bottle, any can, yeah. Even those little 330ml ones, because the pipe goes all the way down to the bottom.
Clever.
And if you
so
put
if you
I
use...
can't. Anyway, go on.
Cheers. If you used a still drink in it, would it give you that sort of halfway between it being still and sparkling, do you think?
That'd be a next test. Maybe I'll try a glass of wine.
Oh, no, like water, surely.
So yeah, isn't it just like a Soda Stream? Because Sal mentioned Soda Stream. Is it not?
No, it's not. It's not like fizzy. It's not added bubbles or anything. You can still see it still.
Oh, okay.
But it's just giving a bit of a froth, bit of life. I don't know exactly what it does. I didn't read the instructions on my man.
It's very cool. It made a techie noise, definitely.
Yeah, it did.
Well, it's also USB powered as well, so I can charge it with USB.
You can take it when you're out training workshops.
Take it with me.
Have your draft beer
Exactly,
in the break. It's all good.
Very good, Jeff.
Anyway, enough about me. I've hogged enough of the limelight. Welcome, Sal.
Welcome, Sal. Yeah, nice to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Generally, most people will know my memory's getting worse and worse, so I can't even begin to hope to put a date on when we first met. Can you?
No, probably not. No, gosh.
10 years?
I was going to say it's got to be about 10 years ago, isn't it?
Sounds about right.
And in what setting? In what setting would you have met? Do you remember where it was or what situation it was?
It was in a pub.
Oh,
it was in a pub. It was in a pub. And was Jean there, or did Jean just say, "Go and meet Sal because she's in this pub"?
No, Jean was there. So I was, I can't remember if I was co-training, I think, with Jean, the very wonderful late Jean Baker, on a Scrum training course. She very graciously let me co-train with her when I was a bit of a rookie. And we were looking for something to do in the evening, and she said, we've got to go and meet up with Jeff because he's around and he's amazing, and would you like to come as well and meet him? And so we came and met you in the pub.
It was cool. It was cool. I remember her saying to me before that, "Oh, you're in England. Sal's in England. Classic American thing. You must know Sal. If you don't, know Sal,
you must live really close together."
Yeah.
But to be fair, we do.
We do. The irony.
So she kind of got that one right. But yes. But that's kind of a rarity in a way, because you don't really you do training, don't you? But you don't really do a lot of it. It's not. You're more of a you have more of a techie background, didn't you, than a training background?
Yeah. So originally I came up, I suppose, the sort of quite standard techie route. So I did an IT and French degree, but essentially an IT degree. And then started off as a programmer, and then an analyst, designer, project manager, the normal sort of route that people do in tech, I suppose. Should I give you the whole potted history? So then I got to about 30, and I was project manager at IBM, and I was missing doing the techie stuff a little bit, and I was a bit disenchanted with what I was doing at work. So I packed it all in for a bit. It's a bit of a recurring theme for me, actually. So I packed it all in for a bit and became a scuba diving instructor. And I went off and lived in Thailand for a year, and then I lived in the Caribbean for a year. So I was going to take a year out, and it sort of grew a bit. Lived in the Caribbean for a year, traveled around Indonesia and Malaysia a bit, lived in Greece for about 9 months. And then I found myself in Greece on this beautiful beach, thinking about the fact that we had customers who were more and less experienced divers. We had different dive sites that were more or less difficult, deeper or shallower. Some had, different currents and drifts and things like that. Or maybe we wanted to do something more technical, like a night dive. And then we had different people who could take folks on dives, different sea conditions. And I found myself sitting on this beach making out CRC cards to design a computer system to solve the kind of like classic scheduling problem. And then I just thought, I'm going to have to go back, aren't I? Because obviously there's part of my brain that really, really wants to go back and do all this stuff again. So I came back to the UK and back into, I was going to say the tech industry, but actually then I started doing my PhD, which was all about so it started out as being what has made the really fantastic tech teams that I've been on special and amazing compared to the ones that were distinctly average, really.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how did that move into your PhD
then? So first year of your PhD is read, write about what you've read. And partway through that, somebody said to me, have you seen this thing called XP that's happened? And they sent me the front page of, I can't remember, Computing or Computer Weekly, one of those magazines. And they were talking about a big, like an internet bank in the UK that were doing XP. And I thought, God, that sounds quite a lot like some of the things I did on these great teams. Like we paired, we were a bit more test driven. We had an on-site customer, et cetera. And so I got in touch with the bank and said, can I come and see what you're doing? And then I think the first or second person that I met there was the wonderful Rachel Davies, who said, I'm doing a training course all about XP. Why don't you come and play the XP game and learn more about it? And that was kind of how I ended up specializing in the psychology of pair programming.
Wow. Awesome. Tell us more about that. The psychology in a nutshell. What's all that about?
Yeah, so I wanted to understand more about how pairs work together when they're pairing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the kind of, I don't know if I want to call it folklore, but a lot of what people were saying about pairing at the time was, there's this role of driver and navigator.
Mm-hmm.
The driver works at a really low level of granular detail, and the navigator's thinking about the bigger picture and all that kind of stuff. And when I looked at some of the literature around the psychology of expertise and that kind of thing, I wanted to see whether it felt like it all matched up. Yeah. And actually, some of it did, but quite a lot of it looked like it didn't. So then I went and recorded. So I think I went to 5 different companies and recorded hours and hours and hours of paired programmers dialogue. And then I transcribed and analysed 14,866 sentences of dialogue.
As you do, yeah.
Yeah, as you do. Especially, I just had a baby at that point, so it was a perfect kind of mind-numbingly repetitive work to do when you've just had a baby. It worked quite well. And broke up the dialogue in different ways to see whether it seems to confirm that there are these 2 roles and they're distinctly different, and actually it didn't.
Okay.
So what it seemed much more like was the driver and navigator together sort of negotiated this landscape of different levels of granularity and abstraction, which makes total sense. It'd be really hard to have a conversation if one of you was talking about syntax and the other one was talking about the customer domain kind of thing. So it didn't seem to be that their heads were in very different domains. It was more that the kind of extra cognitive load of actually typing in and was defined by, obviously who's driving and navigating, and that's why you need to kind of switch regularly. Mm-hmm. But there were some quite cute things as well that I noticed. So I videoed some sessions, and one that was particularly fun, there was one person was driving and the navigator had this ball of paper clips that they'd kind of rolled up into a little ball. And as the driver was kind of clicking with the mouse and moving around, they were, and I think really subconsciously, they didn't realize they were doing it, moving this ball of paper clips around on the desk. And they sort of sit back and talk a little bit about the problem. And then when the navigator then wanted to drive, they'd let go of the paper clips. And that was almost like this subconscious cue to say, actually, I want the real keyboard and mouse now. And the other person would slide it over to them. So it was really fantastic. There was this whole kind of subconscious thing going on. And the other thing that I found that I really, really liked was that more experienced pairs talk significantly less than less experienced pairs, which is interesting because at the time I thought collaboration, that's all about talking and, chatting. And actually it seems like a really important thing to learn is when to kind of take a break, when to just have some thinking time, when to be quiet.
Yeah, I think it's probably still, obviously, that very much XP, obviously, or very much about pair programming. Do you still think, Sal, it's because I know a lot of Scrum teams that either love it or hate it, or not hate it's some strong words, but they get a lot of value, or they've kind of tried it. Is it still being used as much now, do you think, or has it changed over the years?
So I think, so one thing that I see in the kind of evolution of programming now is that obviously people are doing ensemble programming, or some people call it mob programming, more as a whole group. And I think some of the things that we learned from pairing is probably still true about that, which are working together like that is exhausting. And even the teams that I looked at way back then that said, oh, we pair full time, nobody ever paired from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, because you just can't do it.
No.
So they had breaks, and I think maybe some people, when they try it, they kind of think it was all about talking. You've got to talk all the time, you don't have any breaks, it's really, really full on, and they go, oh my gosh, it's exhausting, I hate it. And And I think, you know, part of the learning is that you just can't do it like that, really. Yeah.
I think it also requires a heck of a lot of trust, and doesn't it, in terms of you're very much you're showing off your work to one of your co-workers, and if you know, if you're at all worried about how strong it is or how good it is, potentially, you know, you're not going to want to share everything that, you know, with your co-workers. So I think it is very much probably a sign of the team strength as well.
Yeah, so you can feel quite exposed, I think, particularly in teams where kind of vulnerability and things aren't necessarily the norm. I think it can feel quite exposed. And obviously there are people who would, you know, just rather have quiet time, a bit more kind of contemplative. And I think there's a place in the industry for all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a nice little link onto how most people would be aware of you. I mean, they're not everybody's as lucky as I am to have worked with you in lots of different capacities, but most people will be familiar with you for really starting that difficult conversation about neurodiversity in the industry. Where did that come? Is it always something, the thing for you, or was it something that you thought, you know what, something's happened and something needs to be spoken about here?
So one of my children got an autism diagnosis, and in the kind of early days of that, when I was kind of reading about it, I kind of got very intensely interested in needing to know everything about it in a very cell-like kind of way. As I was reading and learning and going on training courses and all that kind of thing, I just ended up thinking, gosh, you know, a lot of this seems very kind of personally familiar to me. And I called my sister up, who is a clinical psychologist, and said, do you think I might be autistic? And she went, well, don't know if you'd be diagnosable, but you've definitely got a lot of traits. So that was interesting. And now actually I do have a diagnosis, but so then I got to thinking about lots of the people, again, like, you know, some of the really outstanding teams that I worked on over the years had people on them who were incredibly quirky and yet completely accepted. And some of those people were people who could come across as, you know, who maybe, like, traditionally you think, oh, they're a bit grumpy just because they like have peace to think about things and quiet. And then other people who are like incredibly flamboyant and just like loads and loads of different people in different brains. And that seemed to be really important to those kind of special teams. But then when I thought about all the work that I'd been doing as an Agile coach, and I think a lot of that community were doing about, you know, no, we need to make these open plan environments. We need to break down all the cubicles and everybody needs to collaborate all the time. And actually, that's just a different kind of monoculture. So it was kind of like, actually, we've been moving from this monoculture of back in the day when programmers all sat in cubicles and nobody spoke to anybody else, right over to the other extreme of everyone has to collaborate all the time. It has to be really vibrant and noisy and et cetera, et cetera. And that just like in the other case, that just wasn't going to cater for all the different kinds of brilliant minds that we need. So that's kind of why I started getting interested and involved in it, because I was just it was a personal journey that brought me to that point. But the point that I got to was, we've got all these brilliant minds. We know that there's a higher propensity for people who maybe are autistic to be interested in STEM subjects, not exclusively, but, you know, when you look at the number of people who have diagnosis in education or whatever, there is a tendency to So why aren't we supporting those people? Why aren't we making good environments and processes and all that kind of stuff for those kind of brains? And why haven't we got a more inclusive environment? And that's kind of what set me off on the journey of wanting to talk about it. And I far from think I've got all the answers, but I think I'm quite good at poking away at the questions.
Exactly, and that's something that I think, you know, you've helped role model to me over the years, is making sure that you're okay with not, you don't need to know all the answers, and sometimes just starting the conversation, you know, is the part to play. I was reading something, I didn't go into a lot of detail, but it was one of those things where, you know, you read a small article and you think, right, I'm going to flag that and I'm going to follow that up another time. This morning I was reading about this concept of team flow. So I was talking to people about individual flow and this idea of team flow, and the article was kind of, it didn't use the words merged consciousness, but it was kind of hinting at that, you know, shared subconscious awareness of the team. And that came to mind when you were talking about that sort of quiet collaboration almost of, you know, navigator and driver. And I see that in a lot of successful teams as well. Even in a larger group, you can have people that are really, really quiet. And if they've been working together for a while, you've got an appreciation of how people work and where their strengths are and the value that they add. Every now and again, the louder person, shall we say, will turn around and say, so Paul, what do you think? Or just, let's break for 5 minutes and digest and come back. And that takes quite a while to build up, doesn't it? But it's really simplistic, overly simplistic of me to say that we've got to accommodate the introverted and the extroverted. That's way too simplistic. But the definition there of going from the cubicles to the full-on open plan, and now back to lockdown where we're all in our sheds and garages and what have you. It's that kind of backwards and forwards. What is the middle ground? What have you seen change since this conversation started?
So I think it's not about finding a middle ground. I think it's about finding a blended environment.
Okay.
So an environment where you've got open plan spaces, where you've got individual spaces, where you've got, you know, an optionality. I really feel like that's super important to have these different environments and have an optionality about, you know, opting in or out of sessions and rooms and different things like that, but also providing other ways for people to contribute that aren't verbal as well. So maybe setting topics in advance so people know what's going to happen at a meeting, giving them the opportunity to contribute by email or anonymously or whatever that, you know, whatever that looks like for folks. Because those quiet people, and I'm not, you can probably tell, naturally one of those quiet people at all, but I have often found that they'll be quiet, and then but it'll be mind-blowing. It will be like thoroughly, deeply thought about something that you'd missed, or
sorry to interrupt, Sal, but talking about something we've missed, you did break up just after quiet there.
Oh, did I?
So we did miss something there. So these people, they'll be quiet, and then
one sentence, but it's absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Because they've thought about a different angle or a real depth, or, you know, something that's different to the flow of which the rest of the team have been groupthink kind of moving in, if you like.
Paul and I came up with the sidecars, didn't we? And that's kind of the thinking behind the process there.
Yeah.
Of letting people debate, letting people talk, but then asking effectively the quietest member of the group to sum up what they've heard, because they'll have been listening the best. They'll have been processing more than the other people who've been putting their point of view forward. It's a really like token gesture to that, but something to be more inclusive.
It's a phrase I was going to add that we hear a lot is we use a lot in this house here is uncomfortable silences. But I just wonder if it's just more extroverted types that find those silences uncomfortable, because me and my son are the same. We actually quite like a bit of silence. We quite like to sit and just, you know, kind of think. And I think, like you say, many Scrum teams, many teams find that silence deafening, because they feel the need to fill it. They feel the need, someone's got to say something. But yeah, it might just be that we just need a bit more thinking time. We just need a bit more time to mull over this.
And I even think sometimes it might be like the next day. It's such a shame. We say, right, end of the meeting, we've got to make a decision, that's it, all over. And it's almost like you can't come back, you can't revisit it. That's gone to one side now, rather than it's completely fine to tomorrow think of some input that you want to include. Yeah. So I think it's finding new ways to make that happen.
It's a combination of our impatience as a society and that sort of gravitation towards extroversion and noisy collaboration.
And almost the extroversion gets you noticed and gets you further. I think that you're seen as, even, dare I say it, within the Agile space, you're expecting Scrum Masters to an extent. And, many Scrum Masters, me included, come from a developer background where we're not naturally extrovert, so we're not naturally used to that type of environment. So, but we're seeing that that those leaders that we're expecting to be more certainly more vocal and more facilitating decisions. So I think.
And I think we're kind of deadline junkies, aren't we? A little bit.
Yeah.
We're kind of like decision junkies. It's kind of not just in the big. I think that filters right down to this. By the end of this hour, we're going to have decided what we're going to change in the next sprint, or we're going to have decided what we're going to do next, or we're going to have to decided, rather than we just decide on the first little thing we're going to do, and then we're going to feel what, where to go from there.
Do you think, Sal, your training and your style as a coach, as a trainer, has changed on the back of that? What you've learned?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm much less likely to, go into a room and be like, right, everybody stand up. How are you feeling today? A word from everybody, yada, yada, yada. Everyone uses their voice right at the beginning and really expecting everybody to be in the same mode the second you get in the door. But it is hard. I mean, it's hard if you just got a couple of days with a group to allow those bits of contemplation through. But things like, having space for written exercises as well, and people writing things down quietly or contemplating things on their own, or having optionality around things, I think is definitely something that I've changed.
I can't help but speculate that your diving would have helped, because I've only done diving once, and it was, the word I would associate would be calm, and seconded by slow, because you're slower underwater, aren't you? I wonder whether that, and it's quieter as well, isn't it? So your senses are sort of dulled a little bit, and I don't know, that might have played a part somewhere.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, one of the things about diving is the better you get at it, the slower it is. It's like the laziest sport ever, because as your buoyancy gets better, you don't even need to really kind of fin with your feet very much or anything, because you're just sort of in mid-water, carefully looking at, and again, the more interested you get in the marine, the more you start liking, the big things are really cool, but you start liking the really little things. So you get, in a way, you get lazier and lazier as you go along, but it does become more, you've got this very gentle, slow breathing happening. It's not too noisy apart from the sound of your own breath. And although the environment can be quite busy and there can be quite a lot going on, it definitely feels almost meditative. I've been on family holidays before and seen people teaching scuba diving in the pool, and just begged them, like, can I just like blow some bubbles, please, just for a few minutes? They're like, are you qualified? Yeah, I'm an instructor, but I don't even need to go out. I just want to be under the water. And I think some of that, from a sensory perspective, we know some folks with sensory issues find pressure on the body really comforting as well. So obviously when you're underwater, that's really comforting too. So that's lovely. But I'm super lucky. I've got a swimming pool here, and me and my boy, sometimes when we're a bit tense or whatever, I'm just like, it doesn't matter what time it is, it's just jump in for a little while before bed, and it's almost like you can see the stress kind of away, just leaving us. It's really lovely.
Awesome. So your PhD was in collaboration, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it one of those degrees that started off being around something else and then ended up as collaboration, or was it always going to be around collaboration?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I think when I pitched to the laboratory, I was just like, I'm just really interested in what makes expert teams interesting and special. So it was always going to be about teams. But at the beginning, it wasn't about Agile. It wasn't about pairing. It was just about really more about expertise. And I did find out some pretty intriguing things about expertise along the way, but that just didn't end up being the main focus.
Okay. And was Gene's book one of the ones that you were reading in your first year, or did you come across that later on?
No, so I came across Gene later on. And one of the things that I really loved about Jean was that she was so interested in collaboration, and she wasn't at all surprised when I was kind of saying, collaboration, I thought it was about noisy, but actually it's about quiet. And she was like, well, yeah. So that was great. When I finally got to talk to her about all that stuff, it was really good. And how did you meet Jean?
So we were, I'm not sure which way around it was, but we were sort of in the first few Scrum trainers, and so we would get together at least annually, maybe even more than annually, for Scrum gatherings when there was only sort of 20 people or so. They were always over in America, and she was just, because I was a real nervous wreck, didn't like socializing with people, especially outside of my country, and she just made everyone feel at home, and so sort of looked after me a little bit, really, and then we got to drinking and playing games. So yeah,
that was 2006. That was the first time I met her, but she knew you before then, Jeff, so you must have met her before 2006.
Yeah, I think it's probably about 2004. Yeah,
but I think she's played, and she's Jean, she played a massive part in the Agile movement, and I think unfortunately sometimes it gets forgotten about, but I think she deserves a heck of a lot of credit for what she provided, and what she certainly influenced me heavily in terms of those first formative years as a coach. I think that's fair to say she did you as well, Jeff, didn't she?
Definitely, and she helped me in many different ways, practically, mentally as well. And I think it was lovely touch at one of those conferences where they had a nice moment at the start to dedicate that to her, and she would definitely have been one of the first people on the list of these prestigious Pints calls, and no doubt she would have found some time as well. Very generous lady that she was. So as someone who knew her really well, what's some of your memories of Jean?
So my favourite memory, very early on in me knowing Jean, in fact, I'm wondering now if it might have been the first time I met her rather than when I trained with her. I was at a retrospective facilitators gathering. And I think so I can probably date it because I was really heavily pregnant with my middle son, who's now 13. And at the gathering, somebody was playing a game where, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a session that was about a game where you had, it was about politics. And you had like the bank, and you had to kind of like, the idea, I think, was that it sort of set you up to behave politically in teams against each other. And Jean and I decided really early on that we were just going to break the bank. We were just going to ruin the system so that everybody could win together. And I like that. And I always felt that about Jean, that there was something a little bit disruptive in the way that she thought that I really, really liked.
Yeah, a playful naughtiness. But she was very, very keen on everyone getting along, really.
Yeah.
I remember one of her most I don't know what medium it would have been on at the time, so maybe likes might not have been the right word, retweets might not have been the right one. I'm not quite sure, but one of the most attention grabbing posts that she posted was around basically this community of thinkers, and
Yes, with
Scrum
Liz.
stopped taking a stab at Kanban, and Kanban stopped taking a dig at this. And just, you're all good people trying to do good things. Can you just play a little bit nicer, a bit more respect, please? And that I thought took a lot of courage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we still see those divisions in the communities today, right? So sadly, and I think when I first, so I was kind of later to the Scrum community than other people, and I was surprised when I first started going to Scrum things that there were people there that I'd never, that were well known within that circle that I'd never come across before or heard of. And similarly, people, although, kind of maybe some people in Europe in the XP world knew who I was, like lots of people in the Scrum world were like, who are you? Like, where have you come from? So it's really interesting how those communities hadn't really blended all that much, and yet they had this sort of really common interest.
Yeah, I think Jean was one of those that did kind of, she crossed a lot of those boundaries across different disciplines, not disciplines is the wrong word, but communities, didn't she? And she very much tried to bring people together rather than create divisions. And she was always great at that and bring it. And people wanted to work with her, and she didn't really mind, which community you were part of. She just was happy to work with you.
And I remember her generosity hugely. I can
massively,
remember one of the first times I met her, I was in a taxi with her going somewhere, and she was just kept saying to me, how can I help you though, Sal? What can I do to help you? And I almost felt like I could ask her anything and she'd do her best.
I remember the first, Jean was the person that introduced me to werewolves for the first time, the game Werewolves. That was Jean. That was Portland in 2007, I'm going to say 2008, something like that. And I was one of those new trainers to a Scrum gathering, and Jean she just asked me, do you want to come and play this game? And I said, yeah. And then you could just get to know, she just introduced you to everyone, and just the catalyst for people talking. It was great. And I've been playing Werewolves ever since. So I can thank Jean for that.
As we all have, I think.
Exactly, yeah. I remember her standing up in the middle of the room and howling. That was her. She had kind of a call to bring people that they were going to go play Werewolves. So she stood off a chair, just put her head back to the ceiling and just howled. It was hilarious. But everyone knew what she meant. It was like a call. It was brilliant.
Perfect.
And you'll remember this better than me, Sal. I'm drifting slightly away from Jean, but it might have been the same time that we or around about that same time. We were working somewhere together. It might have been a talk, it might have been at a conference, I don't know. But you ever so delicately and politely told me how wrong I was. in front of a big group of people. Yeah. Because I had my definition of collaboration.
This is a bit awkward now, isn't it? I feel awkward.
I can't remember. Okay.
But bear with me, because this is going to be something very useful for everybody else, I'm sure. So I had my definition of collaboration. I think I was talking about the difference between cooperation and collaboration in my layman type words. And you said, actually, Jeff, that's not strictly true. How you define collaboration there. Would you like my definition? Offering, lovely. But yeah, that and I know you've also did a thing with Esther, because I remember having a chat with Esther Derby about the sort of dangers of dipping your toes in other worlds without knowing what you're talking about. I think we can all be a little bit guilty of that with good intentions. But so how would you define what is the technical definition of collaboration?
It's a few years since I've been asked that. So one of the ways that I remember talking about the difference between more of a cooperative way of working together and a collaborative way of working together is if you think that you're with somebody else and you're doing a crossword together, and if you said to that person, well, look, I'm going to do the down clues and you're going to do the across clues, and then we'll work out where they overlap and where the problems are, and then, you know, we'll fill the whole thing in. That's more of a cooperative approach than collaboration. And that collaboration is more kind of, let's read out one across, let's discuss it, let's think about it, maybe quite a little bit, maybe talk about it a little bit until we agree together on what we want to put in for that word and how we want to move, what we want to move on to next and do next. So that's the kind of metaphor that I quite like.
Okay, yeah. So I think I was, the chances are, my best guess at what I was talking about was saying that you can't force collaboration. I could force people to cooperate potentially, but I couldn't force people to collaborate because it was voluntary. It was that kind of thing. But I never really had that sort of technical background behind me to explain it properly.
And I think now, when I hear people talking about many parts of collaboration or agile working or environments, I'm quite, I don't know if disruptive is the right term, but quite often people will make these huge sweeping statements when they're in a session or in a talk about, like, and then everyone does so and so, and I'll be the person saying, well, hang on, but what if somebody doesn't work in that way? Or what if somebody needs to be quiet? Or what if somebody needs time to think about it? Or, you know, needs to be in a different room, or any of these different things. So I kind of like that, not trying to be difficult, but just trying to poke away a little bit and be like, that just sounds a little bit like a sweeping generalization, and I don't think that works with people. And I think we're only just starting to understand the extent to which it doesn't work.
Yeah, the world's not as simplistic as we would like it to be, is it? The last I knew, well, the last time we were together, you were at Cucumber, which my first instinct was to say it's a classic example of your geeky background, but that would be completely unfair because I actually associate it with Cucumber making the geeky understandable for people like me.
Yeah, totally. So that came about in a kind of funny way. So I hadn't done any coding for a while, and obviously the tech world had changed quite a lot. And I thought, I wonder if I still love coding as much as in my head, nostalgically, I think I love coding. What I'll do is I'll do a coding tour. So I hit up loads of people that I knew were coding. So Rachel Davies was one, because she'd gone back to a technical role and still is in one now. Claire Sudbury, who's a good friend of mine as well, and a lead developer, and the folks at Cucumber. I think I was talking about doing this coding tour, and Matt Wynne was like, well, why on earth aren't you coming to us? And so very kind, we had meetups, everyone worked remotely, quarterly meetups, and they said, well, just come to a meetup. We'll invite you to a meetup and you can code with us, and et cetera, et cetera. And that was kind of the start of a beautiful relationship with Cucumber. So what started as just the coding tour ended up with me kind of joining the company, becoming an owner in the company, and having heaps of fun and a really good time. One of my favorite things is I was allowed to, well, I mean, everybody did kind of choose their own job title, and it was C-suite, so I just called myself Chief Being Sal Officer.
I mean, no one can do that better than you.
No, well, there are probably some other Sals in the world that would be equally good at it as me, I guess, or that would be a bit different. So that was really, really good. And then obviously Cucumber are now part of a larger organization, so they were bought, and that was just a good time for me to go, oh, I liked being in a little gang with my mates, but I don't really want to go working for a big big corporate again. So I retired, but I'm always retiring, and then something comes along and sparks my interest, and I go, oh, I'm really bad for that's a shiny, exciting thing I want to get involved with. So yeah.
Has
So
that shiny, exciting thing appeared yet or not?
No, I've I suppose the very unshiny, not very exciting at all thing that happened was COVID. So that all happened just before COVID, which was in a way really good timing for me, because I've got 3 kids with really different needs and experiences, very different age groups at 3 different schools, who needed a lot of support. Well, differing support between the children, but between the 3 of them needed a lot of support with homeschooling and whatnot. So I really was kind of moved into being a full-time parent and teacher and all the things that a lot of us did over COVID. Yeah, and now I'm just having loads of fun. I mean, I've just got into loads of, like, I'm keeping chickens, and I've got really back into going to the gym and doing loads of sport and all that kind of stuff. I'm just about to learn to do dry suit diving, so I can keep diving in the winter, which I've never done in the UK, because I guess we can't really go many other places right now. So I want to do some cold water diving. I'm wondering if I might get into ice diving at some point. But in terms of the tech community, I keep an eye on it. I've got some nice little kind of groups that I keep in touch with, and but I'm not really actively involved in anything in tech right now.
Oh, cool, lovely. Sal, I've got kind of a bit of a well, from my perspective, a kind of a summary, a final question, because I'm really interested, and I know that I've been trying to follow what you've been saying, and very much trying to change my style to be more inclusive of people in my community and people that I teach and coach. If you, based on what you've learned, what you've picked up about how we're all different and how we need to adjust our environment and our style, if you were trying to issue a kind of a call to action, or kind of a request for myself, Jeff, and for others to do something a bit different to improve and make our environments that a little bit more inclusive, what would you ask for? What would you ask of us, or the rest of us, or ask of our listeners, do you think?
I think it would depend if it's a new environment that you're asking people to come into, or if you're going into their environment. So there's going to be 2 parts, and I'll probably forget this partway through, but remind me that there's a second part.
Okay.
So if I was going to do a training course, and it was a new environment, and I was asking people to come into the new environment, I would take photos of the room and send to people in advance, so they know what it's going to look like.
Right.
I would show them what reception looks like. I would give them some structure for the time that they were going to spend with me, what kind of things we were going to do, what kind of questions they were going to be asked, particularly icebreakers kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to put everyone on the spot, things we're going to do. I would make a point of saying there's optionality as many times as I could. I would make sure people knew it was up to them when they wanted to take breaks. I would also want to provide quiet spaces and let people know that it's completely okay to take themselves off to a quiet space whenever they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
If I was going into a company coaching, obviously usually got a bit less scope for moving things around physically and changing the physical environment. I think I would try and have multiple rooms rather than one, if there was any chance of me doing that. I think I would be eyes and ears really open to help maybe the organization think about some of those things. So, you know, sometimes you go in and it's noticeable at bright, loud places, and be able to sort of feed some of that back. That this could be a really overstimulating environment for some people, and is there a different kind of room or space that you can provide for people. And so thinking about those kinds of things. But again, also, really dialing back on the surprises. So I'm going in, particularly, sometimes we do end up in quite uncomfortable conversations, don't we, when we're coaching, where we have to ask people about difficult things that they're facing in their working lives, difficult structures, difficult processes. So just to offer people the opportunity to answer some of those questions anonymously if they wanted to. One of the really lovely exercises that Catherine Kirk showed me at one point that she'd done somewhere was what she called a slow-mo retro, which was a retrospective where people put post-it notes up on a board over days or indeed sometimes weeks anonymously. And the quality and depth of feedback that you get from that kind of exercise, as opposed to we're all in a room together, quickly write something down or shout out your ideas or whatever, it was notably different. You've got to be ready, I think, for some potentially some quite harsh truths if you're going to do that kind of exercise, because people obviously will feel freer to write down some things than they might say in, but often those are the real critical things.
Good. Yeah, it's good. Excuse me. Yeah, that idea of not putting people on the spot. Excuse me. Not putting people on the spot. And yeah, we did the same thing in Nokia when we were there. We had the idea of shoebox retrospectives, similar thing, but basically people it wasn't public. So I suppose with it being on the wall, you can see those things being added as they crop up. But this was anonymous, so people can drop things into literally a shoebox at the front on one of the desks. Similar type of thing. I had, just to come back on one thing there, Sal, it's one of the first things you mentioned, and it struck a chord with me, and I remembered it, and it's something that I'm developing a bit of a bugbear with, is the term icebreaker. Now, many people, and it's starting to wind me up, because I do a lot of improv games, I do a lot of improv exercises, and I've noticed that a lot of people started to come back to me saying, "Oh, I didn't like that icebreaker," or that I'm not a big fan of icebreakers, which I completely understand. Do you think the word icebreaker is becoming something that's that's creating that sense of fear? Do you think it's the wrong word, or do you think we should just? What's your thoughts on the word icebreaker? That's what I wanted to ask.
I think it's got to the point, because people have had bad experiences with them, that when someone says icebreaker, you just go, exactly, you can see people clam up. And I don't think it's because the word ice or the word breaker are bad terms, and putting them together is a bad term. I just think people have had bad experiences. So now when you say it, it's a clam up kind of a word.
Yeah. It's just got a stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only thing I picked up on. Thank you.
Sal, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sal.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been lovely to catch up.
Not just for this, but just for all that you've done, for just starting those conversations, for getting us all, not just me and Paul, but the wider industry, to be thinking more inclusively, to be more mindful about participation, not just around introversion, extroversion, women in Agile, all sorts of different aspects of diversity that you've been championing and just pushing forward. I think it's a huge role that you've played, and on behalf of everyone in the industry, I want to say thank you for that, and of course thank you for joining us here. Any sort of plans for the future, hopes for the future?
Don't know. I feel like at the moment, so I'm also very, very impassioned about climate change, and I've been doing, banging a drum on the streets of London in the last couple of years with Extinction Rebellion, just trying to raise awareness for all of that. I would love for all of those little worlds to meet up and me to be able to do some underwater climate tech.
Well, you never know.
Some blend of interest is going to come along at some time. I do feel very much like the ethical side of technologies very much. If I'm continuing in tech, that's where my heart is now.
Yeah, good place to be.
Well, I'm pretty confident that you will find that shiny thing, and it will be awesome. We're going to raise a glass to Jean as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
To you. Cheers.
Get your Ribena out.
Get my Ribena out.
Cheers, Sal, and cheers, Jean.
Cheers. Absolutely. Cheers, Jean.